notifications come through. But you guys can talk in the meantime from now.
Cool.
Okay. Isn't that an incredible image? I honestly never thought in my lifetime I would see an activist scale off the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
No, I didn't think so either.
Massive.
It's so remarkable to see. And yeah, it's such a brave thing to do. I mean, something that we can't comprehend ourselves, but like...
Do you think they got any sleep last night?
They should have. Later on, they'll be able to transition into some small pods that they might be able to get some sleep in. But
wow,
I don't...
sleep on the job? Are we going to allow this?
Yeah, they're the ones who are having a luxury of a time.
Right.
If by chance you were joining us just now, we should let you know that something quite exciting has happened. 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
That's right, the largest steel arch bridge in the world. We're talking 53 metres high.
And they are doing that to encourage Scott Morrison. They demand Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. And this is something that is happening all over the world. We're seeing it in the UK recently. And
Ireland just a couple of days ago?
absolutely. All these countries across the planet are lining up to declare that this is an emergency and we need to act now.
Why are they doing it? Is it more than just rhetoric? The truth is that we need our government to make a commitment to a climate emergency. We need them to start renewing their urgency on climate change. We need them to put climate issues and our environment at the centre of every single decision they're making.
Absolutely. So once more, if you are just joining us now, 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They've done it to encourage Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. And we know, and they know, and the planet has known for some time that coal is the leading contributor to climate damage. We need to get out of coal-fired power stations and replace them with clean energy soon.
We are seeing the effects of coal every single day. 5 of the planet's warmest years have happened since 2010. And you only have to look in the news to see the way it's affecting our agriculture, our country and our people. We lost over 1 million fish in that Murray-Darling River earlier this year. We lost 500,000 cattle in Queensland as a result of the floods. We continue to see the effects day in, day out to our people, to our economy, to our biodiversity, and it's time that our government stepped up and did something about it.
And we need to say that climate damage is something that will affect the people who have contributed least to it more than those who are contributing the most. That is the injustice of this. We're seeing Pacific Island nations who are going underwater because of the actions of larger countries. There's a massive injustice with this, which is why we need to do everything we can. If you've just joined us, my name's Jack. I'm a digital campaigner here at Greenpeace, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kat.
Katrina Bullock, I'm the Governance and Legal Officer here, and the reason we're joining you today, live from Greenpeace HQ, is because 3 very brave activists have climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge, they've abseiled down, and they have demanded that our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, declare a climate emergency.
And they are doing this because so many Australians and people across the planet are experiencing climate damage today. We're seeing more frequent and intense bushfires. We are seeing intense floods. We're seeing heat waves. We're seeing these bushfires, rather, happening in places like Tasmania in the winter, in cool, temperate climates. This is a way that no one should be living. We've experienced these things before, but nowhere near the intensity and frequency they are now, and we need to act. There's a reason that an ABC poll recently showed that surveyed 100,000 people, and they said climate was the top issue.
And we know that coal is the #1 contributor to climate change. We are so excited today to share with you some of the stories of the people who have been affected by these devastating climate emergencies.
And what else we're excited to show you is the exclusive hookup with the climbers and activists who are up there at the moment. If you have a question for them, please comment below, tweet us. That is the best way to get in touch so that you can ask the questions that you want to of these people doing this amazing brave act. In fact, what we have for you now is one of the exclusives. We have the first update from one of our very brave activists named Laura. Now, Laura grew up next to an open-cut coal mine, so she's very passionate about this issue and what these things can have as far as human effects, health effects rather, on her family and herself. And so what we have now is the first look of that. So very excited to see it and can't wait to hear from Laura.
Over to you.
Hello, we are here on the we are under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We are on Gadigal land today, and I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and recognise that we're on stolen land. I want to start off by saying how amazed I am and how inspired I am by the team that I work with, that I'm working with right now, and that we've made it to where we are. We're safely attached under the bridge, and we know exactly what we're doing. We're here to put our bodies on the line, to send a message to Scott Morrison, and any successes in the coming weeks, that we want climate action now. We want you to declare a climate emergency. There's water lapping at the doors of Pacific Island homes. There's people experiencing it all across Australia. We need real leadership, and yeah, right now the youth of Australia, the students that are striking, are speaking more truth and are doing more for our country than our leaders, which is ridiculous. Which is why we're here. Yeah, we've lost some of our climbers, which is sad, but we can hear them yelling out, "We love you" from the side of the bridge, which is nice. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now. We'll check.
Okay, for those just joining us, I'm Kat, this is Jack, and we are coming to you live from Greenpeace HQ.
And what you've just seen is the first update from one of the brave activists, Laura, one of the three who were up on the Sydney Harbour Bridge calling on Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. The things we need to communicate, and they need to communicate to everyone, especially our current government, is that coal is the leading cause of climate damage. We need to replace all coal-fired power stations with clean energy, and we need to do it ASAP.
The solutions exist, and we won't be the first country to do this. We've seen the UK do it just over a fortnight ago. We've seen Ireland do it a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
It's a renewed urgency. We need our government to understand that climate and energy needs to go at the centre of every decision they are making if we're going to have a bright future for our children.
Absolutely. I think the action matches the urgency. It was so amazing to see her and those other activists sitting there, obviously safe, feeling secure. They're very confident in what they're doing, which is really great to hear. Of course, they wouldn't put themselves in this position if they weren't completely comfortable with that, and we're inspired by their bravery. There's a lot of ways that we can all do our part with this. Obviously, that's their skills and what they've done, but what they've been able to do is represent people who have been fire escape. Like it's a truly awful way to live.
We're talking about a very cool southern state that doesn't usually experience this weather. A state that has now experienced over 190,000 hectares of burning.
Exactly, and these experiences must be horrifying for anyone to live through. But what we're so lucky to have, and what this entire demonstration has been about, is representing and bringing those voices to the foreground so that the Prime Minister and our government cannot ignore them anymore. One of the best parts of this was that we were able to bring together those voices. So this isn't just the three activists at all. This is a team of thousands of Australians who are all calling for this, particularly with Laura. She was able to meet someone called Ed. Now, Ed is a farmer who's out from New South Wales, and he's struggled immensely with the drought, as a lot of farmers have.
A decade-long drought.
Absolutely. And what we have been able to do is pull them together, and Ed to be able to share his story. Now, Ed is quite remarkable because he's about to open and be responsible for one of the largest solar panel farms in the state, even in the country, which is remarkable for someone doing what they can to solve this crisis.
Absolutely.
And so what we have queued up here, I'll just check that that's absolutely ready to go, is that we will have a video of when these people were able to meet. Again, if you were just tuning in, 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They've done that to demand that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency, and they do it on behalf of thousands of Australians who want climate action.
They're demanding that coal-fired power stations be replaced with renewables. They're demanding that we make coal history and that we start to see change in this country, change that millions of people in this country already want. ABC recently conducted a poll coming into the election on the 18th. It was a decent sample size, we're talking 100,000 voters. And they found that the #1 issue coming into this election is climate. And yet, from all of the parties, we are still not seeing the changes and the policies we need to see to be able to transition to renewables and have an economy that's reliant on that.
Absolutely, and whoever is elected on Saturday needs to make this front and centre, as all Australians want it to be. We know it's the top issue, and we know we need to act now in a very meaningful and direct way, and that involves, at the top, replacing coal-fired power stations with clean energy. I'm just going to check briefly with my producers that we're able to go to that video. Amazing. So this is the story from Laura and Ed meeting before this action.
My family and I live on 230 acres outside Goulburn. At the moment, we are in a drought-induced and, I believe, carbon-induced crisis on our farm.
I'm Laura, and I grew up on Gunai country in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria. I basically grew up with coal-fired power stations and open-cut coal mines as the backdrop to my childhood.
The weather we've experienced in the last 9 months is, I'm sure, typical of what is going to happen more and more over the next 20, 50 to 100 years. Long periods of dry weather, and then heavy storm, and then dry, dry, dry. All the forecasts, not only for Australia but for the entire globe, show that people are going to suffer. And that means cities underwater. It means millions of people having to relocate because parts of the globe are just going to be too hot for human habitation. And that will include parts of Australia.
I am here because the youth of Australia is speaking more truth than our government.
I'm here because I know Australia is in the grip of a carbon-induced climate crisis.
And our government need to take action now and declare a climate emergency and face the facts of the climate change crisis that we are all facing.
What we're doing today is an essential and urgent action to create the knowledge within Australia of the urgency of this crisis. It's not something that people like to have to do, but it just must be done.
With the scale of what we're actually partaking in, it's hard not to feel a little bit nervous, but I am surrounded by an amazing community of people that are all very keen to take action and make sure that this climate emergency is addressed.
So we're here today to demand of Scott Morrison that he call a climate emergency and takes action immediately to prevent the catastrophes that will occur if he doesn't.
Some heartfelt words from Laura there.
Sensational, and as you can see, just if you are tuning in, the 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They are demanding that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency, and they are also demanding that we need to replace all coal-fired power stations with renewable energy. If you have just joined in, please, the petition below, it would be so amazing if you could sign. If you want to show your support for the people doing this action, please use the hashtag climate emergency. We have the hookup with these climbers, with these activists, all day. So if you have any questions, please comment below. But about that video we just watched.
Yeah, so what you just saw was exclusive footage in the lead up to this campaign. And I think Laura could not have said it better herself when she said the youth of Australia are speaking more truth than our government. And I believe it was Greta Thunberg who said that when our children are acting like leaders and our leaders are acting like children, it's time for change.
These rallies that happened, particularly the ones in March, had 1.4 million participants. This is amazing, and led by students, led by people who shouldn't have to do this at all. But they're finding that they have to fight for their future because our politicians are not. They're so close to the coal lobby and so difficult for them to really have the courage to break these shackles and do something meaningful.
If children in 128 countries can come together to create change, surely our politicians on both sides, because this is a partisan issue, can get together and make something happen.
In the recent rallies that we saw in May, we saw about over 70 rallies across the country, and they went to MPs' offices directly to hold the people responsible who are responsible for the inaction that we've seen of all governments past. We have never, ever seen an Australian government take a step that really, really, really addresses climate change at its core.
And what's important about those school strikes is that those individuals who feel so strongly about this may not have a vote in the upcoming election. So it's up to you to vote on their behalf.
And if you are one of those students watching, another way that you can help is obviously the petition below. Please talk about this event, this action, using the term climate emergency. We want to put hashtag climate emergency, of course. We want to put as much pressure on the people responsible, the government. We want to call on Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. Now, what I can see just on our screen now is we may have some images of Laura live, which is again one of the most remarkable things that we have for this stream is the exclusive hookup with the people taking this action, and we might just let her speak now. One moment.
It's very chaotic here, but nothing's more chaotic than the climate disaster that we're heading into.
Yeah, we can see what they're doing. We can see what they're doing. It's dangerous.
We're trying to hold this space for as long as possible so that Scott Morrison and the opposition.
We know how to climb. Two rows. So they're
Hear our message
our safety by using that system.
that we need to declare a climate emergency now.
Yes, we know.
We have police rescue that are currently trying to rescue us from the bridge
Yeah, but it's a bit sketchy compared to this.
in a rather unsafe fashion, considering PECK and myself are attached to each other. It's a climate emergency. We're here to take a stand against our government that are currently not representing us, are currently not representing our people. As well as Joe and Beverly and Tony. We also have Lily, that hails from Central Australia, just outside of Alice Springs, Ariante land. And it's really hard to concentrate right now with the police rescue. So I might have to leave you guys. But I just want to send a message to everyone. I want to send a message to our climbers that didn't make it over the edge. Hey guys, cutting to you live from under the Harbour Bridge, where we're currently in the midst of getting hauled up by police rescue. PECK and myself are attached to each other, which might lead to complications. With their method of retrieval. They don't seem to be listening, much like our government's not listening to us. I couldn't think of a better way to be spending my time right now. I think everybody has a responsibility to not rest on their laurels and to address the elephant that's in the room. We have the power to do this. We have people power. Our government are failing us, and we need to put our vote where it counts. That's one way of making change, but we also need to just get out there. We need to put our bodies on the line. We need to stop business as usual. We need mass civil disobedience. We need to make coal history. We need to declare a climate emergency. We We need to stop the corporate greed and the revolving doors of the media and coal lobby, coal industry and government. We have an environmental minister that has a history in coal mining. And we have another minister that makes bets with the public about if climate change is real or not. Our coal fondler and chief, Scott Morrison, brings lumps of coal into Parliament and shakes them around and tells us to not be scared, not to be afraid, and they all have a laugh. We have Peter Dutton and Tony Abbott laughing about water lapping at the doors of Pacific Islanders' homes. Sometimes it feels like I've just fallen to earth and nothing makes sense. This is the only thing that makes sense to me. This is the only thing that we should be doing right now, is addressing this climate issue, putting it in the face of the people that are meant to represent us. My abs are really, really sore from all the gear that we're carrying. It's getting quite cold up here, but we're holding tight. Dan's just had a little snack for some energy. And I might have to tap out right now, but I'll check back in with you in a little bit. Thank you to all the supporters. We really want you to join us in... Oh, I'm getting raised by the police. This is intimidating. The science is there. We know how to solve it. We know what to do.
Guys, that exclusive footage showed exactly what those climbers are going through.
And that was just straight live from Laura. We were watching that as you were watching that to make that clear. And what we want to ask for above everything else is messages of support for the brave activists who are doing this. If you are watching this, please comment below with your words of support. What an amazing brave effort that is.
Thank you to everybody who's already inundated us with messages of solidarity and support this morning for those bushfire victims, for those flood victims, for the activists on that bridge. It means so much to everybody here.
We know if you care about them and about these issues that the most important thing we can do is replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. And we know that our leaders have to do this. We know they can. We know it's in their power. We know that we have the technology to do that, and a lot of other countries are doing it at the moment. We need to declare a climate emergency for the people doing this, for all Australians who are affected by this. Change is coming, whether the politicians accept it or not. And we need to act. I'm just so inspired by the bravery of these people doing this.
Absolutely, guys. Put your vote where your heart is.
And
I'm not talking about... This is an issue that transcends any one politician. It transcends any particular party.
We need to do everything that we can together, like whatever you are capable of, we need to do it. So again, I want you to say what you can in the comments below, sign the petition below and talk about this using the hashtag climate emergency. What we have for you now are some more images. So this is video from PECK, who's one of the other climbers who's out there. He grew up in rural New South Wales and he is one of the brave people up there representing the thousands of Australians affected by climate damage. We're so lucky to hear from him. In fact, that these activists are sharing what they're going through right now is such an amazing story and thing to share. So we're so grateful.
One of the reasons PECK's up there is because he has children and he knows he needs to do something for the next generation. So PECK's up there doing it for his kids. We ask you to show your support for PECK and for everyone experiencing the violence that's caused by climate change during this climate emergency by signing the petition below, using the hashtag climate emergency and sharing this with your friends.
Absolutely. So for anyone who has just tuned in, 3 profoundly brave activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge and they are staying there for as long as they can to encourage Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. Now what I can see just here is we may have some footage that's coming through of PECK, and we're going to cross to that now.
Good morning, PECK Firth here, just checking in. Here we are high above the Sydney Harbour, taking action for the climate emergency. We have 3 climbers here, safely attached to the Harbour Bridge. Here we'll be deploying a message to our leaders to declare a climate emergency and take action on the climate crisis we're experiencing.
Okay, wow, so that was a message from PECK earlier this morning as he and other activists got in place to suspend themselves from the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It is amazing to hear from them in such, a very high stress situation that they're very skilled and prepared for. They're very confident, but any message of support that you can give the people undergoing this profoundly brave action would be appreciated. Use that hashtag climate emergency, and if you can, please sign the petition below. It only takes a second and it helps us to get that message to Scott Morrison that he needs to declare a climate emergency.
And that live footage gives you such a good idea of what these guys are going through. There's sparkling waters below, they'd be smelling salt, there's choppers circling overhead. They know they're doing one of the biggest things that they will ever do to get the message out there. And although they are trained, although this is a controlled environment and we know that it will not inconvenience traffic, or it does not need to, what we also know is that they're not comfortable. This isn't something they do for fun.
No one exactly wants to suspend themselves from a structure like that just for fun. They're doing it for a very important reason. We know that climate damage is affecting Australians and people across the planet now. So we need to get out of coal-fired power and we need to transition to clean energy. Replace it with the transition to the energy source that we know works and exists now. So please, if you can support, use the hashtag climate emergency and sign the petition below. We need Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency.
Absolutely. 5 of the warmest years on record have happened since 2010. We've seen 500,000 cattle die up in Queensland as a result of floods induced by climate change.
And we saw 1 million fish die up in Menindee, the Murray-Darling River. There are so many ecological disasters happening, so we need to do what we can, and our politicians need to as well. Now, the activists who are up there are doing this on behalf of others. They're doing it apart and with others. We are in solidarity with them. And with PECK, he was able to meet someone quite special. That individual was Joe. Now, Joe is someone who you may have actually heard of Joe Dodds. When Malcolm Turnbull, after the fires in Tathra in 2018, said now is not the time to be talking about the climate change.
After 69 houses were lost as a result of bushfires induced by climate change.
Which is atrocious. She called him on it and made headlines doing it because we need to be talking about this because people's lives are being affected today. So she's come down to talk about her experience and also meeting PECK. And so we'll be able to show you that footage just now.
I'm Jo Dodds from far south coast of New South Wales, the small town of Tathra.
My name is PECK Firth. I'm from a regional area in Western Australia.
The reason I'm here is because my town lost 69 homes to a raging bushfire that happened out of season. Unprecedented weather conditions drove that fire, and it drove home to us how much climate change is impacting on Australian communities.
There's a lot of farmers that see the impacts of the drying of the climate, and we as a community, we are seeing this crisis firsthand.
So I've felt it, I've smelt the smoke, and I've seen the devastation that climate change is already visiting on communities across Australia.
I'm here to call upon the government to declare a climate emergency so other communities and all Australians are not affected more than they are already. I'm feeling like there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot of people depending on us. My kids are depending on us. Everyone in Australia and the world who are affected by this climate crisis.
So we're here to demand that governments declare climate emergency now, that they stop coal mining and production, and that we move to renewables urgently.
Wow, so what you were seeing there were the moment that Joe, one of the brave climbers who's up there on the bridge at the moment, met one of the people who have been affected by bushfires, Joe, and one of the thousands of Australians who are being affected by climate damage today. For anyone who is just tuning in, I don't know how you would have missed it in the news. It's forefront, it's up the forefront. If you were waking up at Sydney Harbour this morning, you would have seen something spectacular. You would have seen 3 activists scale the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
An iconic image that will resonate around the world. 3 activists that climbed a 53-metre bridge, the largest steel arch bridge in the world.
Yes.
And they abseiled down the side with one message.
And that message is that Scott Morrison needs to declare a climate emergency. We know that countries all across the planet are lining up to declare that emergency. And what you were seeing on your screen are those first photos that we had at the start of the day, angling up from down next to the bridge of what was unfolding.
An incredible bridge. So we're looking at a structure, an iconic structure that's 1,149 metres long, 53 metres high. You can't think of Sydney without thinking of the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
No, you cannot. And what's so exciting about this is we know across this country that our government and Australian governments past and present have been lagging behind in comparison to the world having ambitious targets to combat climate change. And I'm so proud that around the world people see the image of this iconic structure and regular Australian people demanding our government does better. You do not represent us if you are not taking this issue seriously, because it affects Australians very, very badly.
We know you want to see change. We hear it every single day. In a recent poll conducted by the Australian Broadcast Corporation with a sample size of over 100,000 voters in relation to the upcoming election, they found that the #1 issue for people was the environment and the climate. So why hasn't our government acted?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. And in fact, if you were just witnessing earlier, you would have seen Laura talking about it. There is a revolving door between particularly the coalition currently and the Murdoch media and the coal lobby. We know that if you go into one job, you might end up at the other one, and it continues. There is so much vested interest in politics, and to an extent on both sides of politics, that are accepting donations from fossil fuel companies.
Giant structural changes. And if you're interested in learning more, please jump on our website, www.greenpeace.org.au, and download our Dirty Coal Report and have Dirty Power Report.
Of course.
And have a read. It's super interesting to find out why this is happening. People around Australia are demanding change. Millions of people have been affected by climate change.
And it's important for anyone who is just noting to update you. 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We're going to update you as soon as we get information from those climbers about where they're up to and how they're feeling. We have the exclusive hookup with those climbers, what they would like now more than ever in this very stressful situation as the world watches on and shoppers circle overhead is messages of support. We need them to know that they are loved and that we are standing in solidarity with them. So please, talk about it with the hashtag climate emergency, sign the petition below, and do what you can to ensure that Scott Morrison declares this climate emergency.
And thank you so much to everyone who's already reached out this morning. We've just had word that we're going live to Laura, who's up on the bridge, 53 minutes live.
And what I would tell you as well on top of that is that she has been up there for 3 hours. That is an incredible feat. It is so remarkable. So this that she's recorded just now, so this is a message from Laura recorded sometime just recently. So we're going to bring that to you if you're just tuning in, crossing over now.
Hello, we are here on the we are under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We are on Gadigal land today, and I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and recognise that we're on stolen land. I want to start off by saying how amazed I am and how inspired I am by the team that I work with, that I'm working with right now, and that we've made it to where we are. We're safely attached under the bridge, and we know exactly what we're doing. We're here to put our bodies on the line to send a message to Scott Morrison and any successes in the coming weeks that we want climate action now. We want you to declare a climate emergency. There's water lapping at the doors of Pacific Island homes. There's people experiencing it all across Australia. We need real leadership, and yeah, right now the youth of Australia, the students that are striking, are speaking more truth and are doing more for our country than our leaders, which is ridiculous. Which is why we're here. Yeah, we've lost some of our climbers, which is sad, but we can hear them yelling out, "We love you" from the side of the bridge, which is nice. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now. We'll check.
Guys, for those just tuning in, we're here live in the Greenpeace HQ, Sydney, Australia. I'm Kat.
My name's Jack. I'm a digital campaigner here at Greenpeace, and I need to tell you something quite amazing if you haven't seen it yet. 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It is quite a remarkable feat, and they are doing it to encourage Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. We know that we need to replace all coal-fired power stations with clean energy as soon as possible. We've got just over a decade to do everything we can to get out of fossil fuels and stop runaway climate change, and that's what these brave activists are doing today.
So what does a climate emergency actually mean? It means putting the environment at the centre of every government decision. It means renewed urgency around climate change, looking at the data that's been there. It's been there for so long, since 2007. We're going back, 12 years. A Nobel laureate won the Nobel Peace Prize because of their research on man-made climate change and the effects and what needs to be done.
Absolutely, and people are experiencing this today, especially in Australia. We've got increasingly harsh droughts, we've got bushfires that are frequent and intense, and we've got floods as well in the same category. People living in fear of these events happening more frequently than they ever have before, which is why those activists are doing something so remarkable today. They are representing thousands of Australians who want action on climate change. Particularly, the activists were able to meet and talk to some of the wonderful people who have lent their stories to this. Once more, if you are joining, 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge, demanding Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency, and we need to replace all coal-fired power stations with renewable energy. We're going to give you the hookup as soon as we can with any updates from the climbers themselves, and if you have any shows of solidarity or support for these individuals, please show it by commenting below, tweeting or messaging with the hashtag climate emergency. We need every bit of support we can get. But, sorry, to what I was saying, we've got who exactly are we talking to this time?
All right, so we're about to cross over to Tony and Beverly.
That's right,
This is an exclusive behind the scenes where they were preparing for the climb. Tony and Beverly have been working on
the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah, phenomenal job. They've been divers for 40 years.
40 years.
Which means they have seen the evolution of the Great Barrier Reef from a vibrant place where millions of biodiverse wildlife lived and that housed jobs for thousands.
Sure, and they've seen it turn into something that's bleached and dying that their children may not experience as they have. So we're going to cross now to the image where these wonderful people met. So please watch ahead.
Hi, I'm Tony Fonts. I'm a dive operator up in the Whitsundays.
Hi, I'm Beverly Fonts. I'm also a dive operator in Whitsundays.
And we're here today because we feel that we are in a climate emergency.
My name's Lewis. I'm a data analyst. And I suppose, obviously grew up during the Millennium Drought, and then since then watched, situations both in Australia and abroad become increasingly dire and increasingly urgent. Watching that unfold, it's obviously quite concerning.
We've been diving the reef for over 40 years, and it's been a real dream. But these past few years, that dream has become a nightmare, primarily because of the climate emergency. We're seeing the Great Barrier Reef dying.
And so I think it's becoming increasingly clear to myself and scientists and regular Australians that we're in an extremely dire situation that we're entering into now.
We're also concerned about the number of people whose jobs are dependent on the Great Barrier Reef. The reef employs thousands of people, and there are families out there who really need the reef to be in a healthy condition.
As well, we're quite concerned about the marine life that you find on the reef. Nobody's speaking out on their behalf, the turtles, the whales, the fish, and they're losing their livelihood just as we are losing our livelihood.
I've come here to try to take some action, to try to instill the kind of sense of urgency that, I believe this issue requires. And so, we have the science is becoming increasingly serious, and then also, we've got the personal stories of how people on the ground here in Australia are already being affected, and hope to call attention to some of those voices as well.
The action today is powerful. It's sending the exact message that Australia needs to hear.
So our politicians have not taken enough action to address climate change, and unfortunately it's taking actions like this to bring the message hard and fast to the government.
Look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling a little bit nervous, but trying to keep a lid on that. I think everything's coming together. I feel very confident that we'll be able to do what we're trying to do, and I think what we're calling for today is for some leadership from our supposed leaders to declare that climate emergency and treat it with the seriousness that they owe, the citizens of Australia, the world, and future generations who are going to be just dealing with this mess.
One strong message for our Prime Minister.
That message is that we need to declare a climate emergency, and we need to do so immediately. Scott Morrison is our Prime Minister, so he needs to follow in the footsteps of all of the people across the UK, Ireland, all declaring climate emergencies. So we need to do what we can. A way you can do that is by signing the petition below or showing support for the remarkable climbers and everyone affected by climate damage across the planet and this country.
Guys, we have been inundated with support this morning. Thank you so much for sending in everything you've sent us. It means the world to the climbers up there, to the scientists that are working on this, the doctors, the bushfire victims, the flood victims, people that are the face of climate change in this country, that are part of this team and this action today. We know you want to see change. Polls have shown it. We know this is the #1 issue in the upcoming election.
Absolutely, and we can see even just on the feed right now, people like Mark commenting saying inspirational, like Jacques saying thank you so much for what you've done. It is such a fantastic thing to see. So please keep this support coming through. We want to be able to share these with the climbers themselves who are being so brave and so inspirational today.
And guys, stay tuned, because every single moment down here we have new footage coming in. We've got new images from the bridge team that's out there, and it's pretty incredible. You can see from the footage that we'll cross to in a minute that there's windy conditions down there. It's hot. The sun has now risen. They are 53 metres above sea level, which can be, a little uncomfortable for anyone at the best of times.
I can only imagine.
Not try this at home, kids.
For sure, and we have the ability to show you how they are feeling and what they are going through. So what we actually have now is some record from Laura. So Laura is one of the climbers. She is very brave. She grew up next to a open cut coal mine, so she knows the effects of coal on our climate and on our lives, which needs to be stressed that coal is the #1 contributor to climate damage, and we need to get out of all coal-fired power stations and switch to clean energy.
Declaring a climate emergency means saying no to coal. It means telling our politicians that change is coming and they need to start listening to the bulk of our population that wants to see change in this area. Make coal history. Replace all coal-fired power stations with clean energy.
So once more, we'll be giving you as many updates as we possibly can. New footage always rolling in. So please send your messages of support for the climbers and talk about this using the hashtag climate emergency. And please sign the petition just below. The more who do, the more we are able to put pressure on the Prime Minister to do what he ought to and declare a climate emergency. But now, for what you've been here for, we're able to cross now to Laura to see how she's been going.
Hello, we are on the we are under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We are on Gadigal land today, and I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and recognise that we're on stolen land. I want to start off by saying how amazed I am and how inspired I am by the team that I work with, that I'm working with right now, and that we've made it to where we are. We're safely attached under the bridge, and we know exactly what we're doing. We're here to put our bodies on the line, to send a message to Scott Morrison, and any successes in the coming weeks, that we want climate action now. We want you to declare a climate emergency. There's water lapping at the doors of Pacific Island homes. There's people experiencing it all across Australia. We need real leadership, and yeah, right now the youth of Australia, the students that are striking, are speaking more truth and are doing more for our country than our leaders, which is ridiculous. Which is why we're here. Yeah, we've lost some of our climbers, which is sad, but we can hear them yelling out, "We love you" from the side of the bridge, which is nice. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now. We'll check.
Hi there, if you are just joining us, those images were of Laura, one of the profoundly brave climbers who was updating us as she got prepared to take position under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. If you were just joining and you haven't seen the news updates, three activists have climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge and are asking Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency.
3 brave activists have sailed over the side of the world's largest steel arch bridge and have been up there for 3 hours to get their message across.
Oh, it's such an enduring feat. I'm so impressed with their ability to do it, but also the fact that they are using what they have, their skills as very trained climbers, to do what they can to bring attention to this issue. We know it is breaking across the country and even being reported all over the world. So this is so important that we have this momentum to really put pressure on Scott Morrison. So if you can, please sign the petition just below, talk about this event using the hashtag climate emergency. We need to ramp up this pressure, because if our government isn't doing what they can to stop this crisis, we need to do what we can.
It is terrific that everyone at home is doing what they can in their everyday life and their everyday workplace, but the truth is we need to see structural change.
Absolutely.
We need to see change led by our government. A couple of weeks ago in the UK, they declared an environment and climate emergency. Ireland just a couple of days ago did the same, and we and the climbers on that bridge, as well as the giant team of individuals behind them that have been affected by climate change and understand the risks, are asking for our government to do the same.
And that's the thing about today, is that we've seen people who've been affected by bushfires saying we need to do action like this. We've seen people affected by floods saying this is necessary, by heat waves, but who have been tourist operators on the Great Barrier Reef, who've seen one of the most amazing marine life ecosystems on the planet go bleach and die. Like, we need to do what we can. And that's what's so remarkable about today. So if you can show your support in the comments, please do. These climbers are so brave and we're so inspired by their action, but everyone who is standing up for climate justice across the country and across the world.
We are already in a climate emergency. Our government might not have declared it yet, but we are seeing the effects every single day, and it's time that we said no to coal. It's time that our government realised that change is coming and they need to get on board and really run with the will of the people.
Absolutely.
It's time that we replaced all of our coal-fired power stations with clean energy.
We know this is a top issue for voters. It's one of the first times in history that a majority of Australians have said yes. Out of 100,000 people sampled by the ABC, they all put in the environment and climate at the top of the agenda. We know this is the top issue, and our politicians need to reflect it. Currently, any policy that's gone through does not do what we need to do to actually curb this crisis in a meaningful way. We need to replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy.
Guys, let's go back to basics. Why do we have 3 brave activists scaling one of the world's largest and most iconic structures? Climate change. And what is climate change? Well, it happens when changes in the Earth's climate system result in new weather systems that last for decades. And they're unpredictable, and they're happening at an unprecedented rate. So what this means in practice is we're seeing floods, we're seeing fires, and fires in places like Tasmania, a traditionally very cool southern state. that doesn't experience that kind of weather.
Which is why we need to replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. We know that's a lead cause of climate damage, so we know there's a way to take action. Our politicians can do it, so we need to. And what we have for you now is something quite special, something that only we have here, which is the time that Laura, one of the activists who's up there, and Ed, one of the farmers in rural New South Wales who's affected by drought, were able to meet in preparation for this climb. So please, if you haven't seen this story yet, please watch, and in the meantime, talk about this event using the hashtag climate emergency, sign the petition and show your support for the brave activists up there now. But what we have to do is just wait a little while just as we queue something up. But again, if you were just joining, 3 activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They've been up there for 3 hours, more than 3 hours now. It is such a physical feat that they've put their bodies on the line for this amazing issue.
We've seen some live footage, which we'll cross to soon, and in that you can see the audio goes a little bit fuzzy because there's great winds there. They are 53 metres above the sea level. They've got choppers circling overhead. They've got an audience watching. To be clear, these are professional climbers who wanted to dedicate their skills to this cause. This is a controlled environment. It's been designed in such a way that it will not affect traffic. But it's one of the most incredible things I've seen in my lifetime.
And that's why we need to do what we can to show our support, right? We need to show what we can do to help these people, show that we believe in them and what they are doing. So we are ready to cross now to that footage of how they were getting prepped for this action. We're very excited for it. Please watch ahead.
My family and I live on 230 acres outside Goulburn. At the moment, we are in a drought-induced and I believe carbon-induced crisis on our farm.
I'm Laura, and I grew up on Gunai country in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria. I basically grew up with coal-fired power stations and open-cut coal mines as the backdrop to my childhood.
The weather we've experienced in the last 9 months is, I'm sure, typical of what is going to happen more and more over the next 20, 50 to 100 years. Long periods of dry weather and then heavy storm and then dry, dry, dry. All the forecasts, not only for Australia but for the entire globe, show that people are going to suffer. And that means cities underwater. It means millions of people having to relocate because parts of the globe are just going to be too hot for human habitation. And that will include parts of Australia.
I am here because the youth of Australia is speaking more truth than our government.
I'm here because I know Australia is in the grip of a carbon-induced climate crisis.
And our government need to take action now and declare a climate emergency and face the facts of the climate change crisis that we are all facing.
What we're doing today is an essential and urgent action to create the knowledge within Australia of the urgency of this crisis. It's not something that people like to have to do, but it just must be done.
With the scale of what we're actually partaking in, it's hard not to feel a little bit nervous, but I am surrounded by an amazing community of people that are all very keen to take action and make sure that this climate emergency is addressed.
So we're here today to demand of Scott Morrison that he call a climate emergency and takes action immediately to prevent the catastrophes that will occur if he doesn't.
So if you were just joining us today, right now, we do have an exclusive update. For starting, 3 activists had scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge to demand that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. They've been up there for 3 hours, and what we can update you with now is that Laura has safely lowered herself from the bridge, so she is absolutely safe.
We can confirm that Laura's doing well, and Dan is still up on the bridge.
Yes, that's right. We have Dan, who remains up there on the bridge, being profoundly brave, continuing with this action, demanding Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. This is breaking across the country and indeed the planet. People are watching on as this happens, so we need to ensure that for Dan, who remains up there, that he has the most support we can possibly give him. And the way to do that is to share this story. Use it using the hashtag climate emergency. Comment below this video. Sign the petition. Tell your friends what is happening and post about what it is, because anything we can get to Dan to show what an amazing effort he's doing and that we are with him in solidarity helps.
And thank you for the hundreds of messages of solidarity that we've already received this morning. I know Laura, as she comes down, we will certainly keep her updated with what the nation is thinking and the fact that they are getting behind her. It really means a lot.
And again, the reason they are doing this is such an important cause. The reason is that we want Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. We need him to replace all coal-fired power stations with clean energy. So please, if you can, sign this petition. Please post about this event. Do what you can to let these brave climbers know that we are in support of them and stand in solidarity with this action. Because it's not just about them, it is about the thousands of Australians who are affected by climate damage today. And the thing about it is that we're a country that experiences it like much more than others by comparison. We have droughts, intense droughts. We have bushfires that are happening now in winter in Tasmania, a cool place. We have one of the most remarkable reef system on the planet, and it is dying under our.
Our extreme weather events are increasing in frequency and intensity. Now, right now, we're going to cross to some behind-the-scenes footage we have of one of the activists, PECK, meeting with bushfire survivor Joe. Now, Joe actually comes from Tathra, New South Wales, where 69 houses were lost from bushfires as a result of climate change.
And what we know about Joe is that she made headlines when Malcolm Turnbull said that now is not the time to be talking about climate change after those fires. Well, we should always be talking about climate change, and
particularly when we see the effects like that.
Absolutely. So we'll cross now to that footage of Joe and PECK getting prepped for this climb.
I'm Jo Dodds from far south coast of New South Wales, the small town of Tathra.
My name is PECK Firth. I'm from a regional area in Western Australia.
The reason I'm here is because my town lost 69 homes to a raging bushfire that happened out of season. Unprecedented weather conditions drove that fire, and it drove home to us how much climate change is impacting on Australian communities.
There's a lot of farmers that see the impacts of the drying of the climate, and we as a community, we are seeing this crisis firsthand.
So I've felt it, I've smelt the smoke, and I've seen the devastation that climate change is already visiting on communities across Australia.
I'm here to call upon the government to declare a climate emergency so other communities and all Australians are not affected more than they are already. I'm feeling like there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot of people depending on us. My kids are depending on us. Everyone in Australia and the world who are affected by this climate crisis.
So we're here to demand that governments declare climate emergency now, that they stop coal mining and production, and that we move to renewables urgently.
So if you were just joining us now, that footage was of the preparation for what you were seeing this morning, which is one of the most remarkable feats I've ever seen. 3 activists have suspended themselves from the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and they are demanding that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. If you want to do what you can, please, there's a lot of things you can do. The update that we have for you, very importantly, is that Laura has lowered herself down from the Sydney Harbour Bridge. She is safe. We need to remind you that Dan remains up there.
Dan is still up there, and he has been up there for just over 3 hours now. So
remarkable.
if you do want to get involved, please, we implore you, sign the petition below, use the hashtag climate emergency, share this with your friends and family. Because as Laura said this morning when she went up for the climb, in those conditions, they are putting their bodies on the line. This is uncomfortable, but they're doing it because this is a message politicians need to hear. It needs to be integrated into every policy. They are demanding that our Prime Minister declare a climate emergency and put climate and the environment at the centre of every decision they make.
We know that coal is the leading contributor to climate damage, and we know that the best thing we can do to fight climate change, that we need to do within this very, very small period of just over a decade to stop it from being runaway and catastrophic. We know the way to do that is to get coal-fired power stations out of our energy sector, get clean energy in there immediately. We know we can do that. We know the technologies available and the countries all over the planet are taking that up. So we know it exists, and we need to take action. Our government needs to take action like these remarkable climbers and all the people across the planet have been.
Absolutely. According to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in October 2018, we had 12 years to Harbour missions. And guys, 12 years means acting now. Policies take time to come into effect. It takes time to see the effects of those.
And it's even less now. Like, the time is eating away. We have to replace all coal-fired power stations with clean energy as soon as possible. And to remind anyone that's just joining, we will have new footage coming through of this action, of what these brave people have been doing. And with that, we will be able to send that message to government, to Canberra, to say that we need to declare a climate emergency. Again, countries across the planet have been doing this. Ireland and the UK quite recently. Countries are lining up to treat this disaster for what it actually is, an emergency.
And Australia is lagging behind. It's time that all politicians from all parties recognise that this is a partisan issue. This is a human rights issue. They need to integrate this into every policy they make going forward.
Now, what we have for you soon is an update that was from Laura. Now, Laura, to remind you, has been safely lowered from the Sydney Harbour Bridge. She is fine, and we will update you on how things progress past that. But Dan remains up there. But what we have available is the first bit of footage that we got at the start of the day from Laura. This is when they were just underneath the Harbour Bridge, getting ready to lower themselves down into position. So we are so excited to show this to you. It is an amazing effort that they've been able to do. And as a show of solidarity, I would remind you, please comment below, talk about this issue using the hashtag climate emergency. We need to do everything we can to match the brave efforts of these people and everyone who's shared their story by climate damaged communities. So we'll just pass now to that footage.
Hello, we are here on the we are under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We are on Gadigal land today. And I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and recognise that we're on stolen land. I want to start off by saying how amazed I am and how inspired I am by the team that I work with, that I'm working with right now, and that we've made it to where we are. We're safely attached under the bridge, and we know exactly what we're doing. We're here to put our bodies on the line, to send a message to Scott Morrison, and any successes in the coming weeks, that we want climate action now. We want you to declare a climate emergency. There's water lapping at the doors of Pacific Island homes. There's people experiencing it all across Australia. We need real leadership, and yeah, right now the youth of Australia, the students that are striking, are speaking more truth and are doing more for our country than our leaders, which is ridiculous, which is why we're here. Yeah, we've lost some of our climbers, which is sad, but we can hear them yelling out, "We love you" from the side of the bridge, which is nice. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now. We'll check.
Okay, and back to you guys.
Guys, welcome back and thanks for joining us here at Greenpeace HQ. If you just woke up this morning, you'll find that an iconic image is resonating across Australia. In breaking news, 3 activists had climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the largest steel arch bridge in the world, and abseiled down the side with one powerful message for our PM.
And that is to declare a climate emergency, something that countries all over the planet are lining up to do, to treat this crisis for what it is, an emergency. What you can see on your screen right now is the moments just before sunrise. This is footage from the climbers as they are getting ready to, oh, look at that light, that's remarkable.
Sunset.
It's, yes,
sunrise, the things you do to see a good sunrise.
But
this is incredible.
As you can see, they've got a significant amount of ropes. There's no audio for this, just so you're aware, but they've got all their ropes, taking that wonderful footage. You can see the Sydney Harbour there, which would have had media and people walking into work, witnessing this amazing feat.
You can see the Opera House in the background there, that sparkling blue water 53 metres below them.
And this is when they're just getting ready to get into position where they are suspended down below the bridge. That bridge, the bridge in total, its height is above 143 metres, but where they are is about 53 metres above sea level, which is quite remarkable.
As someone who gets dizzy in elevators, I have a newfound respect for the climate team here.
And just a reminder again of why they're doing something so drastic. This action is completely justified given the drastic condition that our climate is in. We need to take action like this. We need to do everything that we can in our power to stop the stranglehold that coal has on our climate and ensure that our politicians are doing everything they can to replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. We know it's the leading cause of climate damage, but our economy is wedded to it and our politicians need to step up their game if we're going to stop runaway climate change.
They are going to this length because they need this message to be heard. They need to see a change where we are replacing coal-fired power stations with clean energy. They need to see a change where their families and their children can grow up in an environment where they can be happy, safe and healthy.
We've seen so many wonderful stories. Again, these activists are doing their part, but they're also doing it on behalf and with a team of people who've been affected by climate damage. We've got people who live in Tasmania who are now every summer bracing for catastrophic fires. These are people living in fear every season in a place they should feel safe and comfortable, and watching forests that have existed for thousands and thousands and thousands of years being destroyed in moments. It's devastating. We've actually just got a little update for you.
We've got some new footage coming through very soon. One of our producers, Max, is just lining that up for you.
So again, this is the place to be if you want to see the updates of what's been happening and the footage that we are getting through about this demonstration and what it means. Again, please show your support for climate emergency by using the hashtag climate emergency, signing the petition below and demanding that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency.
Share this content and in this upcoming election, use your vote to make sure every single politician and every political party understands that you want to see climate and environment at the centre of all of their decision making, the centre of all of their policies. We can't ignore this anymore, guys. It's getting to the irreversible tipping point of climate change.
And we know that Australia's been lagging behind. We know we're drastically affected by climate damage, but our policies comparatively do not represent the threat. Now, what we actually have for you now is some new footage. This is the first bit we'll be seeing this footage, and this has just come from... Okay, just what are we doing now? Great, so this is... from one of the climbers to another climber, holding that banner there for 100% renewables under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. What a sight!
Gosh, and you can see that flag blowing in the wind. It's not easy conditions out there, but these are trained climbers in a controlled environment. They know what they're doing, guys.
So that's them looking up to where they were suspended, and that's Laura there, right? And you can see the ferry coming across for people starting their day. What a sight what a sight to see as you're coming in for work in this city and seeing these brave activists up there. Once more, they're doing this drastic action for the thousands and thousands of Australians who are affected by climate damage today and want to see this action. This is what we're cutting to now, is them getting set up for the day. This is in darkness that they were getting prepped and getting into position. It's amazing footage. You can't see too much, but you can imagine how scary it must have been to get all these things together.
The atmosphere this morning was absolutely electric as they walked onto the bridge, one of the world's largest and most iconic structures, ready to do something very big, something that they knew would, as Laura said earlier, put their bodies on the line, because this is an issue that they believe in. This is an issue that is backed by science. This is an issue that our politicians aren't listening to.
Absolutely.
We need to see meaningful change, and they are demanding a climate emergency be declared here in Australia.
And we know that you can do what you can as well. So what would be amazing if you could comment in the section below for the person who's still up there. We know that Dan remains in position up there. We know Laura has been successfully lowered down, and we know that any support you can give at this point is remarkable. So please talk about this using the hashtag climate emergency, sign the petition and leave a comment below for these brave activists who are doing this remarkable thing. What we have next?
So right now we're going to go to Tony and Beverly. Now Tony and Beverly have been working for 40 years as divers on the Great Barrier Reef, and they've seen the evolution of the reef from a vibrant place that housed millions of creatures and allowed for an economy where thousands of jobs were created, to an environment that's slowly degrading over time and
Absolutely.
bleaching.
This is one of the most remarkable environments underwater on the planet. We are so lucky to have this in our backyard, yet we're not doing what we can to preserve it rather. In 2016 and 2018 we had 2017 rather, we had unprecedented bleaching events, potentially irreversible bleaching events. So these are people who have witnessed the slow change in that beautiful, beautiful environment and are scared that they won't be able to show and share it with the next generation. So what we would love to do is show you just now what it was like when they met and what their message is for carbon. Yep.
The person they're meeting here is a member of the climb team, Lewis.
Yes.
In the preparation for this climb, they got the opportunity to meet with some of the victims of climate change, some of the bushfire survivors, some of the flood survivors, some of the people working on the reef who are seeing the change day to day. So over to Lewis, Beverly and Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Fonts. I'm a dive operator up in the Whitsundays.
Hi, I'm Beverly Fonts. I'm also a dive operator in Whitsundays.
And we're here today because we feel that we are in a climate emergency.
My name's Lewis. I'm a data analyst. And I suppose, obviously grew up during the Millennium Drought, and then since then watched, situations both in Australia and abroad become increasingly dire and increasingly urgent. Watching that unfold, it's obviously quite concerning.
We've been diving the reef for over 40 years, and it's been a real dream. But these past few years, that dream has become a nightmare, primarily because of the climate emergency. We're seeing the Great Barrier Reef dying.
And so I think it's becoming increasingly clear to myself and scientists and regular Australians that we're in an extremely dire situation that we're entering into now.
We're also concerned about the number of people whose jobs are dependent on the Great Barrier Reef. The reef employs thousands of people, and there are families out there who really need the reef to be in a healthy condition.
As well, we're quite concerned about the marine life that you find on the reef. Nobody's speaking out on their behalf, the turtles, the whales, the fish, and they're losing their livelihood just as we are losing our livelihood.
I've come here to try to take some action, to try to instill the kind of sense of urgency that, I believe this issue requires. And so, we have the science is becoming increasingly serious, and then also, we've got the personal stories of how people on the ground here in Australia are already being affected, and hope to call attention to some of those voices as well.
The action today is powerful. It's sending the exact message that Australia needs to hear.
So our politicians have not taken enough action to address climate change, and unfortunately it's taking actions like this to bring the message hard and fast to the government.
Look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling a little bit nervous, but trying to keep a lid on that. I think everything's coming together. I feel very confident that we'll be able to do what we're trying to do, and I think what we're calling for today is for some leadership from our supposed leaders to declare that climate emergency and treat it with the seriousness that they owe, the citizens of Australia, the world, and future generations who are going to be just dealing with this mess.
Thank you. Thank you to Tony, Beverly and Lewis for sharing their stories.
And what you may be witnessing, if you've just tuned in now, is that some Greenpeace activists, some activists rather, have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and they've done that to ensure that Scott Morrison declares a climate emergency. We know he needs to do this because the coal-fired power stations are responsible for climate damage, and we need to transition from them to clean energy immediately. So please, if you have support for the climate that remains up their dam, please comment below. Talk about this event using the hashtag climate emergency. It cannot be said enough. And sign the petition below. That was amazing to see that, wasn't it, Kat?
The effects of climate change are all around us. One of the reasons I'm here at Greenpeace is because when I was 14 years old, my family went on a trip to Cairns, and I saved up all my pocket money and I got to go scuba diving for the first time ever, and I saw this beautiful, vibrant reef. And I'm still a scuba diver, and I can tell you it looks so different now. The colours are muted, the fish have migrated away. The underwater world that has been surrounding us and keeping our agriculture and our fisheries alive for so many years, particularly for our rural communities, it's not there anymore. It's dying.
And it's in our backyard. Like, we have this amazing thing that we're so lucky to share and to witness, and like the splendour and beauty of this amazing reef system and all the things that live there. But we've been doing a very bad job of keeping it protected. And part of that is ensuring that our government gets out of coal-fired power and transitions to clean energy. We know the solutions are there, and we know that countries all over the planet are lining up to do so. A lot of them are declaring a climate emergency.
UK declared it a fortnight ago.
And Ireland even recently. There are people, economies and countries similar to us that are doing this amazing, amazing thing. So we need everyone to raise their voices now to show a solidarity with the people who are taking part in this action. Not just the brave climbers, and particularly Dan, who remains up there still, but the thousands of Australians who are affected daily by climate damage.
Absolutely. We've got Arctic sea ice melting at a rate of 9% per decade. And if you think about that, we're essentially an island economy. We have a lot of our industry based around the skirts of Australia.
We're a coastal community, yes.
We are, and as that sea level rises, as the temperature warms, as our sea life changes, as our agricultural industry changes, as we see extreme, impactful weather events like we've seen over the last year, where you saw the photos of the Murray-Darling where over 1 million fish washed up dead. You saw in Queensland 500,000 head of cattle die as a result of the flooding there caused by unique weather patterns we haven't seen, guys. Climate change. You've seen unusually cool southern states like Tasmania experience bushfires where over 190,000 hectares of land have been ravaged.
Pristine forests that have existed for thousands and thousands of years that we are so lucky to be able to share that are being destroyed thanks to our obsession with coal. We need to get out of it and do what we can.
Make coal history, guys.
The main thing as well is that the way that climate change works is that it will impact communities that are contributing the least to it. We are so lucky to know so much about the wonderful Pacific Island nations nearby that are now looking out to sea and not knowing how long they'll have on the places that they've called home. It is a devastation, and they're not the ones responsible. Big polluters are. So we need to hold them accountable. We need to hold our government accountable for ensuring that coal-fired power stations transition to clean energy now. And that's what we're calling for this climate emergency. We need Scott Morrison to look this issue in the face and say that this is a climate emergency.
We need renewed urgency, and we need our government to start putting climate issues at the centre of every decision and every policy they make, no matter what party they stand for.
Absolutely. And after this election, no matter who comes into it, who comes into power, it's bipartisan. We need to make sure that everyone involved is part of this transition out of coal-fired power.
Guys, earlier this morning, one of the climbers who scaled that 53-metre high bridge, Laura, recorded a message for the world. And we're here to share it with you again, so crossing over to Laura.
Oh, we've just got to...
In a minute.
We've just got to cue that up. But again, Laura, just so everyone is aware, has safely been lowered from the Harbour Bridge, so she is fine. We'll update you on any developments there.
Only one of the 3 climbers. We can confirm she's doing fine. We can confirm that Dan is still up there.
So if you have any messages of support for Dan, again, please make them in the comments below. We've loved them coming through. This is, I hope and pray this has a big effect from Nicole. Like, we believe so too. Like, this is why this type of action is essential. It's drastic and it's big, but this issue is drastic and big. We need to take big actions to ensure that our leaders listen, because they haven't for 15, for 20, for 30 years.
We haven't seen meaningful policy for a very, very long time, despite the fact that the majority of Australians want to see it. In a recent poll from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, with a sample size of over 100,000 voters, they found that the #1 issue for voters at the moment is climate, it's environment, and it's time politicians sat up and started watching. That's why these 3 brave climbers got up on that bridge this morning.
And they are representing, again, all the people who we know are being affected by this today. We know that farmers out in New South Wales and all across the country, in Queensland as well, Victoria, who are farming, know that their livelihoods and the environment out there is being absolutely decimated by drought in an intensity that they haven't experienced. We know that people who are experiencing bushfires are living in fear because they are more frequent and more intense. We know that people who live near the Great Barrier Reef are watching one of the most remarkable reef systems die. So we need to do what we can, and these activists have been doing that today. What we can show you now is a bit of footage from Laura. So Laura is one of the very brave climbers. She's now been successfully lowered and is safe, but this is a message she recorded while suspended, and we're just watching this with you now. So we'll go to that now.
We are here on the under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We are on Gadigal land today, and I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and recognise that we're on stolen land. I want to start off by saying how amazed I am and how inspired I am by the team that I work with, that I'm working with right now, and that we've made it to where we are. We're safely attached under the bridge, and we know exactly what we're doing. We're here to put our bodies on the line, to send a message to Scott Morrison, and any successes in the coming weeks, that we want climate action now. We want you to declare a climate emergency. There's water lapping at the doors of Pacific Island homes. There's people experiencing it all across Australia. We need real leadership, and yeah, right now the youth of Australia, the students that are striking, are speaking more truth and are doing more for our country than our leaders, which is ridiculous. Which is why we're here. Yeah, we've lost some of our climbers, which is sad, but we can hear them yelling out, "We love you" from the side of the bridge, which is nice. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now. We'll check.
Hi, I'm Tony Fonts. I'm a dive operator up in the Whitsundays.
Hi, I'm Beverly Fonts. I'm also a dive operator in Whitsundays.
And we're here today because we feel that we are in a climate emergency.
My name's Lewis. I'm a data analyst. And I suppose, obviously grew up during the Millennium Drought, and then since then watched, situations both in Australia and abroad become increasingly dire and increasingly urgent. Watching that unfold, it's obviously quite concerning.
We've been diving the reef for over 40 years, and it's been a real dream. But these past few years, that dream has become a nightmare, primarily because of the climate emergency. We're seeing the Great Barrier Reef dying.
And so I think it's becoming increasingly clear to myself and scientists and regular Australians that we're in an extremely dire situation that we're entering into now.
We're also concerned about the number of people whose jobs are dependent on the Great Barrier Reef. The reef employs thousands of people, and there are families out there who really need the reef to be in a healthy condition.
As well, we're quite concerned about the marine life that you find on the reef. Nobody's speaking out on their behalf, the turtles, the whales, the fish, and they're losing their livelihood just as we are losing our livelihood.
I've come here to try to take some action, to try to instill the kind of sense of urgency that, I believe this issue requires. And so, we have the science is becoming increasingly serious, and then also, we've got the personal stories of how people on the ground here in Australia are already being affected, and hope to call attention to some of those voices as well.
The action today is powerful. It's sending the exact message that Australia needs to hear.
So our politicians have not taken enough action to address climate change, and unfortunately it's taking actions like this to bring the message hard and fast to the government.
Look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling a little bit nervous, but trying to keep a lid on that. I think everything's coming together. I feel very confident that we'll be able to do what we're trying to do, and I think what we're calling for today is for some leadership from our supposed leaders to declare that climate emergency and treat it with the seriousness that they owe, the citizens of Australia, the world, and future generations who are going to be just dealing with this mess.
Guys, welcome back. I'm Katrina Bullock, the Legal and Governance Officer here at Greenpeace Australia.
And I'm Jack, a digital campaigner here at Greenpeace Pacific Australia. And we want to say just what you've just been seeing now. We saw a bit of footage there from Laura, one of the brave climbers who scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge to demand that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. We had an update from her at the start of the day as they get ready into position. And then what we've just seen is a beautiful bit of footage that is from Tony and Beverly, who are two diving operators at the Great Barrier Reef, meeting Lewis, one of the climbers involved with this. And what they were able to talk about was quite remarkable in the sense that they have seen the devastation of climate impacts firsthand. 40 years of experience diving, and they've experienced the worst of it themselves. So what we need to do above all else is make sure that we replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. We know that's the best chance we have of stopping runaway climate change. And Scott Morrison, you need to declare a climate emergency to respect the bravery of what these people have done and what all Australians are calling out for. We know from a poll from the ABC that 100,000 people polled that climate and the environment was the top issue. This is important and people want action, Kat.
Families' homes are flooded. Their backyards are burning. Their rivers are drying up. We are losing Arctic ice caps at the rate of 9% per decade, and that's huge. That means our sea levels are rising. We're seeing our climate warming, we're seeing our seasons changing, we're seeing sea levels rising, sea caps shrinking. Guys, this is an emergency if ever we've seen one.
And it requires the type of drastic action we are seeing today. So again, if you're just joining, 3 activists scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They have done so to ensure that Scott Morrison declares a climate emergency.
You cannot resolve a crisis unless you start treating it as a crisis.
And what we can say as well is that from the time this started, it has been 4 hours. The remaining climate Dan, who was still up there, has been there for 4 hours. That is a feat of endurance, and we're so proud of his effort and excited by the fact that he is representing some of the most affected people by climate damage in this country.
While most people were warm and safe in their beds this morning, Dan and a team of activists, very bold, brave activists, walked along the Harbour Bridge and scaled themselves over the side. They abseiled down, and they did so with one message for the world. They represent the people, and they want to see real action. They want the government to declare a climate emergency. And what we can see now is under the bridge, the action is still going. We are demanding climate action now. We are demanding our government take responsibility. We are demanding that they replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy.
Oh, it's such an amazing shot to see those flags and those banners down there, and the people, the spokespeople down on the ground who are also supporting this. It's quite remarkable. These people who have come here to support this action today are those who have been affected by climate damage more than others. They are people who have experienced bushfires, who have left their homes because they don't want to experience these things again. We've seen floods that have been truly devastating where you don't know. I mean, one person to talk about actually is Amelia. Now, Amelia's home from Townsville, and she moved there, had a raised house, thought she'd done everything she possibly could to prepare for the unlikely circumstance of a flood.
But with just a couple of hours' notice, authorities knocked on her door, told her the floodgates were opening.
And that she had to get a raft together, putting all of her possessions on it and go up a flooded street. That included putting her dear cat in a cage and going up that road, not knowing what she'll come back to.
Can you imagine putting your cat in a cage and trying to push it to higher ground?
It's just a devastating thing, and this is why we're doing this. It's not because of these simple climbers wanting to do it. It's because thousands of Australians are calling out for it, and we need your help to do that. So please, if you have a message of support for these amazing climbers and the people they're representing who've been affected by climate damage, leave it in the comment section below, sign the petition, and talk about this with the hashtag climate emergency.
Keep them coming, guys. So many brave Australians have shared their stories today to make sure the face of climate change is seen and that it's real.
To remind everyone, we've got a couple of questions in about the safety of what's happening. They are trained and they are very good at what they do, and they did not do it out of any easy reason. They know the risks and they are willing to grapple with them, and they are the best place to do this. And to remind you, they are all safe. Dan remains in position, so we're in solidarity with Dan, ensuring that he's doing everything he can. So any message of support would be greatly appreciated.
This is a safe, controlled environment, and these are individuals who have trained for this climbing. Do not try this at home. This is a very, very big deal. It's something that's not easy, it's not comfortable, but they are doing it because this is a message that's bigger than you, it's bigger than me, and we need to see systemic change.
And it's bigger than the individuals doing it. What has been so wonderful about this is that they are representing and a part of a team of people who have been affected by climate damage, particularly Laura, who we heard from earlier. It's been the devastation of drought on his crop, on his livelihood, and on the way he lives. And he's doing what he can by investing in a solar farm, which is remarkable. But anyway, we've got when they met, a beautiful bit of footage there, and we'll cut to that now.
My family and I live on 230 acres outside Goulburn. At the moment, we are in a drought-induced and I believe carbon-induced crisis on our farm.
I'm Laura, and I grew up on Gunai country in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria. I basically grew up with coal-fired power stations and open-cut coal mines as the backdrop to my childhood.
The weather we've experienced in the last 9 months is, I'm sure, typical of what is going to happen more and more over the next 20, 50 to 100 years. Long periods of dry weather, and then heavy storm, and then dry, dry, dry. All the forecasts, not only for Australia but for the entire globe, show that people are going to suffer. And that means cities underwater. It means millions of people having to relocate because parts of the globe are just going to be too hot for human habitation. And that will include parts of Australia.
I am here because the youth of Australia is speaking more truth than our government.
I'm here because I know Australia is in the grip of a carbon-induced climate crisis.
And our government need to take action now and declare a climate emergency and face the facts of the climate change crisis that we are all facing.
What we're doing today is an essential and urgent action to create the knowledge within Australia of the urgency of this crisis. It's not something that people like to have to do, but it just must be done.
With the scale of what we're actually partaking in, it's hard not to feel a little bit nervous, but I am surrounded by an amazing community of people that are all very keen to take action and make sure that this climate emergency is addressed.
So we're here today to demand of Scott Morrison that he call a climate emergency and takes action immediately to prevent the catastrophes that will occur if he doesn't.
So what you've seen just there is a wonderful meeting of Ed and Laura. Ed being a farmer affected by a drought, and Laura, one of the very brave climbers who suspended themselves from the Sydney Harbour Bridge this morning. It's an amazing feat.
Could not have said it better myself. Laura mentioned in that behind-the-scenes exclusive footage, look, the youth of Australia is speaking more truth than our government, and that is exactly what we've seen over the last couple of months as the school strikes took place.
Absolutely. 1.4 million students across the planet participating to call on their government's perspective to absolutely end the age of coal-fired power stations and transition to clean energy. It's such a feat. And we've actually, because of this broadcast, we're able to get new footage from these climbers, which is an exclusive here. No one else can see this. We've just got it in and we'll be watching it with you. This is from the perspective of these climbers. It's been amazing that they've had the capacity to share this with us. It is such an amazing gift for this perspective. It's remarkable.
This started almost 4 hours ago.
Oh, yeah.
Those climbers have done an incredible job of getting the message out there, and thank you so much to everyone for your messages of solidarity and support.
And so just before we watch this, please, if you haven't already, sign the petition below. Comment below with a sign of support. Again, from our understanding, Dan is still up there at the moment, so we need to make sure that we have every bit of support for everyone who's participated in this, and let's drive this action home, especially with an election this Saturday.
And the people they're representing, the people who've shared their stories this morning, the victims of climate change, the people who've experienced floods and fires and lost their livelihoods as a result of these changing weather patterns.
And so now we're able to cross to that footage that we've just got in, so please stay tuned.
G'day, PECK here, checking in. We're still on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, taking action for the climate emergency that we're experiencing across the country and the world. rescue police are they are closing in quickly, but we will try and stay for as long as possible and deliver this message to Scott Morrison and anybody who takes over his position and future leaders. So we're standing with thousands of Australians around the country. We are calling for an immediate action on climate change and a declaration of climate emergency from our government, and we need to start making changes and making changes now and to take action. We'll check in as soon as we can. As you can see, we are possibly getting some company, but we will try and stay strong and keep the message loud and clear. Delivering the message that there is a climate emergency and we need immediate action from our government. It's a beautiful morning. We've just got some company upstairs. But we are going to stay for as long as possible and to make sure the message is heard loud and clear by those in power and those who take power after the election. So yeah, we'll stand strong and we'll be hanging around. Okay, here we are, Sydney Harbour Bridge. Rescue police are attempting to remove us from our stand to voice the people of Australia's concerns about our climate crisis. Hello. We're staying as long as possible, but the police are messing with our ropes. It's a little bit disconcerting, considering they use less ropes than us, but we'll put our lives in their hands, I guess. And we have our friends down there standing strong. Sure.
No, no. It's a bit scary.
Yeah. As long as Scott Morrison can read our message down here and over there where our friends are, that we are in a climate emergency and we need to declare it immediately. Daniel, do you have anything to say before I go? Need to declare a climate emergency now.
Hello. We're still here, very slowly getting pulled up by police rescue. I feel like our message is pretty hard to ignore. We've chosen a pretty good vessel to send the message out. I feel like each and every
Sensational. What you've just seen there is some amazing footage from these climbers using every ounce of what they have available to update us and send this message to Scott Morrison that he needs to declare a climate emergency. If you are just tuning in, my name is Jack. I'm a digital campaigner at Greenpeace.
And I'm Katrina Bullock. I'm the Legal and Governance Officer here at Greenpeace Australia. And what we've just witnessed is something monumental, something that I've definitely never seen before in my lifetime. Before the crack of dawn this morning, 3 Aussie activists scaled and abseiled down the side of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the largest steel arch bridge in the world.
And they've done this because we need to send a message to our government that they need to declare a climate emergency. This is so important. We've seen countries around the world lining up to do this. We've got UK lining up. We've got a few days ago Ireland announcing a climate emergency.
Just learnt that late last night.
It's Zurich even passed that. And in New Zealand, we've seen activists also putting pressure on their government, even as early as today, to be declaring that climate emergency. All around the planet, people want this, and we know Australians do, because a recent poll from the ABC showed that of a sample size of 100,000 people, that climate and environment is the top issue. This is so monumental. We know that people want this, but our government has not done anything able to.
So what does climate emergency actually mean pragmatically? Well, it means change is coming. We need to stop our reliance on coal. We need to replace coal-fired power stations with clean, renewable energy options. They exist. We have solutions ready to go. It's time that the government started funding them.
And once more, if you're just tuning in, 3 activists had scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They're demanding Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. What we want everyone to do is to show their support for these brave climbers by using the hashtag climate emergency, by signing the petition below. They are doing this for thousands of Australians who experience climate damage themselves. We know we've got bushfires, we know that we've got floods that are happening infrequently, more intensely than they ever have before. In fact, they're representing individuals. One of the most remarkable people we were able to meet was Jo Dodds, and she lives out in Tathra, and that place was bore witness to about 69 homes being destroyed in a bushfire. And Jo made headlines because Malcolm Turnbull, in response to this, said now is not the time to be talking about climate change, which is a ridiculous sentiment.
Now is exactly the time to be talking about climate change.
10 years ago, 20 years ago.
We are seeing bushfires rage across the country during seasons where we've never seen bushfires before. We are seeing floods ravaging Queensland. We are seeing the effects of climate change in our everyday life. Jo has seen them. She's experienced it firsthand, and we feel very honoured and humbled that she was willing to share her story with us. She's currently beneath the bridge, protesting in solidarity with
down
those
there with
activists
support.
up there.
Absolutely. And again, if you were just tuning in, we need to remind you that the activists are entirely safe. We need to make that clear. They are skilled, they are trained, we're getting updates from them. They're okay, and they're doing everything they can to put their voice in this climate debate and make sure that our leaders do everything they can to stop it.
This is a controlled environment. They have mitigated every risk you can think of. They have backups for the backups. Please do not try this at home. This is very much a specialised activity by people who have a specialised skill set.
Absolutely. The risk assessments were huge. I've seen them. Very extensive. So what we've got here...
I'm Jo Dodds from far south coast of New South Wales, the small town of Tathra.
My name is PECK Firth. I'm from a regional area in Western Australia.
The reason I'm here is because my town lost 69 homes to a raging bushfire that happened out of season. Unprecedented weather conditions drove that fire, and it drove home to us how much climate change is impacting on Australian communities.
There's a lot of farmers that see the impacts of the drying of the climate, and we as a community, we are seeing this crisis firsthand.
So I've felt it, I've smelt the smoke, and I've seen the devastation that climate change is already visiting on communities across Australia. I'm
here to call upon the government to declare a climate emergency so other communities and all Australians are not affected more than they are already. I'm feeling like there's a lot at stake, and there's a lot of people depending on us. My kids are depending on us. Everyone in Australia and the world who are affected by this climate crisis.
So we're here to demand that governments declare climate emergency now, that they stop coal mining and production, and that we move to renewables urgently.
Guys, welcome back. For those who are just joining us, we're covering breaking news that is resonating across Australia right now. We've seen 3 Aussie activists before the crack of dawn climb the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the largest steel arch bridge in the world, scale over the side, put their bodies on the line to send a very powerful message to our Prime Minister.
And that message is that we need to declare a climate emergency. This is so important that we do this. We're seeing countries across the planet line up to do it. We're seeing Ireland, we're seeing the UK, we're seeing all these countries line up to call this crisis for what it is, an emergency that we all need to act on today, and that's what these brave climbers are doing. They're representing some remarkable people, Kat.
Yeah, momentum is building. Last night, Zurich announced that they're in a climate emergency. Their government acknowledges that. We need to see renewed urgency in Australia. We need to see coal-fired power stations replaced by renewable energy, and we need to be doing our part.
This is so integral. We need to make this clear. Coal is the leading contributor of climate damage. We've known this, and the reason that we're not acting upon it is because of the fossil fuel industry and how tied in it is with our politics. And we need to break those shackles, and we need to transition immediately to clean energy. We know from the IPCC's recent report that we have just over a decade to stop catastrophic climate change, and that does not mean waiting for however many years. We need to act right now to deal with this. And so something that we're prepared to show this sentiment that Australians are feeling across the country is something called the Change is Coming. Change is Coming is this federal election campaign, and this video we'd love to show it to you right now.
It's a culmination of the actions that are happening around the world right now. We are at a precipice of change, a moment in time where you can either be on the right side of history or you can be shackled to the coal industry and apologise to your grandchildren.
And this is what is so important about the federal election we have on Saturday, that we are voting for parties and policies that are strong on climate. So if you can, just for now, we'll just watch this video just for 1 second.
Change is coming. Whether they choose to accept it or not. Our lives are forged by fire. Eroded by rain. And driven towards an edge we can't afford to cross. Change is coming. To stop the damage being done to our climate by coal, to rise above the corrupt systems and petty politics, and to those who put coal before Australian families. No more excuses. Change is coming. Will you be a part of it? Authorised by Dom Rowe, Greenpeace Australia, Pacific, Sydney, spoken by Isabel Lucas.
Welcome back, guys. Well, the climate is warming, the seasons are changing, the sea levels are rising, and it's time we acted.
That's exactly right, and that's why we're out here today. If you have just joined in, 3 Greenpeace activists had scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We'll give you as much updates as we possibly can. They are demanding that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. It is something that he needs to do now and follow in the country's footsteps who have done this. What you can see on your screen there is the Sydney Harbour Bridge at the crack of dawn as these activists had gotten into place. Truly a brave effort by them. 53
metres above sea level, the smell of salt resonating in the air, choppers flying over above as they did this.
It's amazing.
So important for our democracy to get our message out there.
Absolutely. It is a drastic action. We understand that. We know it's serious and we know there's a risk, but we mitigated everything possible to get this message across as clearly as we possibly can, that we need to transition from coal-fired power stations and replace them with rich renewable energy.
Guys, we've got exclusive content continuing to come through by the minute, and we're about to cross over to Laura and Peck on the bridge.
That's just from a short time ago. So please, yes, pay attention. If you are able to, please talk about this using the hashtag climate emergency. Please sign the petition below and show your support for these brave activists and the people around the country who are experiencing climate damage. We'll show you that video just now.
G'day, Peck here, checking in. We're still on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, taking action for the climate emergency that we're experiencing across the country and the world. Rescue police are closing in quickly, but we will try and stay for as long as possible and to deliver this message to Scott Morrison and anybody who takes over his position and future leaders. So we're standing with thousands of Australians around the country. We are calling for an immediate action on climate change and a declaration of climate emergency from our government, and we need to start making changes and making changes now and to take action. We'll check in as soon as we can. As you can see, we are possibly getting some company, but we will try and stay strong and keep the message loud and clear. Delivering the message that there is a climate emergency and we need immediate action from our government. It's a beautiful morning. We've just got some company upstairs. But we are going to stay for as long as possible and to make sure the message is heard loud and clear by those in power and those who take power after the election. So yeah, we'll stand strong and we'll be hanging around. Okay, here we are, Sydney Harbour Bridge. Rescue police are attempting to remove us from our stand to voice the people of Australia's concerns about our climate crisis. Hello. We're staying as long as possible, but the police are messing with our ropes. It's a little bit disconcerting, considering they use less ropes than us, but we'll put our lives in their hands, I guess. And we have our friends down there standing strong. Sure.
No, no. It's a bit scary.
Yeah. As long as Scott Morrison can read our message down here and over there where our friends are, that we are in a climate emergency and we need to declare it immediately. Daniel, do you have anything to say before I go?
Need to declare a climate emergency now.
feel like our message is pretty hard to ignore. We've chosen a pretty good vessel to send the message out. I feel like each and every
Guys, welcome back. For those of you who are just joining us, we're covering a group of activists, a climb team, that before the crack of dawn were up on the Harbour Bridge, abseiling down the side with one very powerful message for our Prime Minister.
And that was to declare a climate emergency. We know countries across the planet are lining up to do so themselves. We've seen it in the UK, we've seen it in Ireland, and even last night in Zurich, they were doing that themselves. We know that people everywhere are doing what they can. Round of applause in the office. We'll get that update for what that means as soon as possible. Again, we are able to give you what is happening down there as directly as possible. If you haven't yet, please talk about this issue, talk to your friends, use the hashtag climate emergency and sign the petition below. We need to make sure our voices are heard and that message gets down to the pollies in Canberra.
So if our government declares a climate emergency, what does that actually mean? That means acknowledging that we need to end coal.
Absolutely.
We need to replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy.
We need to do that. We know change is coming. We know that the people of Australia and around the world want this. We know they want to make coal history because we saw that climate and the environment is the #1 issue for voters in Australia. This is the first time in an election that has been the case. It is remarkable. So we know that energy is there. We know people want this, and we know we need to take whatever action we possibly can, which is what these brave climbers have done this morning.
We have incontrovertible science that says that coal is the #1 contributor to climate change, and we know climate change is the #1 issue facing civilization at the moment.
And this demonstration has been going for 4 hours, which is absolutely phenomenal. And what we're able to bring you quite soon is an update from down there. Now, we've got some footage that's come from the climbers themselves. It is exclusive, okay? And this includes Laura and PECK, 2 of the climbers are up there. We've just gotten this footage, so we'll be watching it with you.
And guys, please bear with us. This is a pretty incredible feat of not just climbing skills, but of technology. They're up on the bridge live streaming to us.
So we'll just see what we've got, and we'll go to roll now and see how that looks. A moment. So what we've been seeing there is some images and footage from the climbers that are up on the bridge. We'll give you an update as to where they're up to and how this is unfolding. We can see that's PECK just there and had been there, one of the brave climbers who got up. He is someone who is affected, grew up in a regional area, a rural area of Australia, and has children and knows that for them he has to do what he can with the skills he has to fight this climate emergency, and that is what he's been doing this morning.
Absolutely. These are individuals who have suspended themselves 53 metres above sea level. I get nervous in glass elevators, Jack. I don't know how they're doing it, but I know why they're doing it.
And they're doing it because we need our government to declare a climate emergency, because we are seeing communities affected by this today, with bushfires that are experienced in winter of all the times of the year, in cool and temperate places like Tasmania. People living in fear that this is a regular thing that they'll have to live with. It's just not fair. 5 of the planet's warmest years have occurred since 2010. We have seen the Murray-Darling River have millions of fish
rock up on its shores. In Queensland, floods have wiped out 500,000 head of cattle. In the usually cool southern state of Tasmania, we've seen 190,000 hectares of bushland be ravaged by bushfires during a season that we've never really seen bushfires before.
There is so much reason to act today, and what we've been so lucky is to have some of the people who've been affected by this directly. What we're about to show you is an interview that happened down this morning just next to where the action was taking place at the Sydney Harbour Bridge between Joe. And Joe is someone who grew up in lives out in Tathra, was affected by the bushfires out there, and she was able to talk to one of our campaigners this morning about why she's involved.
You might have seen some of the exclusive behind-the-scenes footage from Joe earlier. Tathra, New South Wales, if you remember, lost 69 homes to an unseasonal bushfire that is closely linked to climate change.
So we need to make sure that these voices are front and centre with this campaign, and that you're doing what you can. Just before we show it, please, if you haven't already, please tweet about this, share this on social media with the hashtag climate emergency, sign the petition below, and make sure that we are ensuring that the Prime Minister Scott Morrison gets the message. We need to declare a climate emergency. But now we'll just show that footage from that interview this morning.
Good morning everyone, my name is Alix, I'm a campaigner from Greenpeace Australia Pacific, and I'm here today underneath the Sydney Harbour Bridge where 3 activists have descended from the bridge and have unfurled banners that read 100% renewable, and we are here today to demand that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency. I'm joined by Jo Dodds. Jo is a bushfire survivor, and she is here as well to make that same demand to Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. Jo, tell us a bit why you're here today.
Because my family suffered a catastrophic bushfire event. It affected my whole community in the town of Tathra in March 2018, that's only last year. We lost 69 homes, so many of my friends and neighbours lost not just the houses they lived in, but everything in them. They left with just their handbags, just their phones. So the effect of climate change has already hit my community, and it hit us so hard that it will take us decades, in many cases, to recover from that. That event made me so crystal clear aware of the threat that communities like mine face from now on from climate change. It isn't something that's going to happen in the future. Climate change is something that's affecting us now. It's affected my community 18 months ago. And it was a weather-driven event that was unprecedented. And that's something that the fireys keep telling us, that the weather conditions driving these bushfires are unprecedented and only going to get worse. So for me, coal is so toxic. I have seen what coal does to communities in the end, and that is to burn down homes, destroy livelihoods, and put the lives of Australian families at dire risk. So I don't want to see another community go through what we have been through and are still going through. I don't want to see families out of their homes. I don't want to see people running barefoot from fires. I saw all of that while I stood on the riverbank and watched for 5 hours waiting for my home to burn down with everything in it. So if that doesn't motivate people to put their hands up and say, I don't want to see coal mining, I don't want to see fossil fuels being used, I want them in the ground, I don't want families in the ground, I want coal in the ground, and I want the government who's prepared to step up, take action, transit us to renewables urgently, because the next fire is just around the corner. Fires are happening now all through the fire season, all through winter. We had a second fire in winter, and that fire went for 60 days, all through winter. So this is a new level of horror. We don't have the resources to fight it. We need action now.
Thank you, Jo. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about coal. Not many people know that coal is actually the #1 cause of climate change, and particularly here in Australia. Australia is the world's largest coal exporter. We still have coal-fired power stations all around the country, which just seems ridiculous when we're in such a sunny, windy country, and the opportunities for clean energy are there. We could see Australia becoming a leader in clean energy, renewable energy. So, you have to wonder why Scott Morrison isn't taking action.
I think the Prime Minister has been captured by the fossil fuel industries. and is not governing for the people, because communities like us see a direct relationship between investment in coal and the threat to our homes. So for the government to be listening to that one sector, the fossil fuel sector, and to be promoting that ongoing mining and burning of coal is an absolute insult to the families who are increasingly put at risk. Their lives are put at risk by this activity. So it's my number one enemy now, because I've seen what it does. So we've got to keep the coal in the ground before there are people dying.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.
And if you are just joining us, we are giving you as much breaking news as possible on what has unfolded today, with some activists climbing the Sydney Harbour Bridge to encourage Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency. What you can see in front of you is how they got started. Under the cover of darkness, they have so much bravery going forward with something like this.
Before the sun even rose this morning, they were out there, the smell of salt in the air, 53 metres above sea level, walking out onto that bridge, ready to propel themselves over. I mean, these are professional climbers, but nothing stops you getting butterflies in your stomach when you're doing something of this magnitude and this scale.
For sure, and you can just see there the sun rays on their faces. We've got PECK there and Laura, two of the very brave climbers who are getting ready to do their descent, their abseil down from that rigging there. It's just such a feat. I mean, look at that. You've got the ferries coming across, people starting their day and looking up and seeing what an amazing action this is and what they are demanding.
Absolutely. As the sun rose this morning over the harbour, as that beautiful sparkling blue water we all know so well came into view, what people could see was three inspiring climbers descending from the bridge in what is one of the most monumental actions I've ever seen.
And what they are doing is demanding that we replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. That needs to happen if we are going to stop runaway catastrophic climate change. And we know that our government, if they're serious about combating it, needs to do that. It is front and centre. Coal is the leading contributor to climate damage. So if you're not addressing that issue, you're not serious about climate action.
Along with this wonderful team of activists who are up there climbing the bridge is a much broader team of people who have been affected by climate change. We're talking about doctors, scientists, people who have been affected by the physical effects. We've got flood victims, we've got victims of bushfires, people who have lost their houses, people who have lost their ability to live off the land, people who had jobs in agriculture they can no longer do because rivers are drying up and grounds are cracking.
We have one of the most amazing reef systems on the planet, the Great Barrier Reef, and under our watch we've seen it slowly start to bleach and die. That's on us, and we need to do everything we possibly can to protect it and protect these amazing natural environments for the next generation. I've been so lucky to live that way and experience these beautiful things. I've lived by the beach my entire life, and I feel so lucky to be in the absolute bliss of nature, and we need to have that as a part of our future generations.
Climate change is warming our environment. Sea levels are rising. We're getting these unseasonal weather patterns that are unpredictable and that humans and animals have not yet adapted to. We need to stop it before it goes any further, because we are on the precipice of a moment in time where if we don't act now, it will be too late.
Change is coming, whether the politicians accept it or not. We need to band together and make coal history. We can do this. We just know it starts with that. We know it needs to start with coal being out of our energy system, and we need to have clean energy in there. That is the leading thing. And that's why Scott Morrison needs to declare a climate emergency. Countries across the planet are doing this. So that's what this action is about. They were up there for up to 4 hours, which is like remarkable, such a feat for these brave activists.
It's a pretty incredible story, and one that continues to unfold as the day goes on. We continue to get new footage, new exclusive moments on the bridge with these activists coming through. Beneath the bridge, we've got a cacophony of a group of people forming that are supporting these activists. And on social media, across all of our platforms, we've been inundated with comments of solidarity and support.
So please keep them coming. It really makes this all worthwhile, and we want you to do something else. Please sign the petition that is at the bottom of your screen. We need you to stand in solidarity with the amazing climbers and the entire communities that have been affected by climate damage. This is about them.
And we need you to lend your voice to this action. We need you to hashtag climate emergency. Get behind these people. They're representing you. They're representing your children. They're representing a future of human beings that we may never even meet. but who deserve better.
Absolutely. This is something that's happening here and now. We need to do everything we can to fight this, and I'm so impressed with the bravery of the people doing this and everyone who is lending their stories to this amazing campaign. We need everyone's support with this, so please sign the petition, talk about this using the hashtag climate emergency, and leave a comment below with support for these amazing brave activists. It really does mean the world.
Absolutely. We've seen the effects of climate change. It's been broadcast everywhere in the news, whether or not that's the narrative of the story. We've seen 500,000 head of cattle die in the floods in Queensland as a result of new seasonal changes we've never seen before that are caused by climate change. We've seen almost 1 million fish wash up on the shores of the Murray-Darling River, and we've seen school strikes. We've seen millions of people, 1.4 million school strikers across 128 countries come together and demand change.
This is so amazing because we are seeing the generation that is going to be affected by this the most, showing leadership that our politicians have not been able to show. This is what is so remarkable about this issue, is that it transcends politics, it transcends the side of it, and it transcends how old you are, where you are from. We all need to do our part.
This is human rights, guys. It's bigger than any one policy, it's bigger than any one party. We need everyone to come together on this.
So if you are just tuning in, once more, some activists have scaled the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They have suspended themselves there to ask Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency, and they're doing it with a team, on behalf of all of the people across this country who are affected by climate damage, through bushfires, through floods, through heat waves, through drought, through a reef system that's dying. We need to do everything we can, and you can too. So please use the hashtag climate emergency, sign the petition below, and send a message of support and solidarity to these brave climbers. They're incredible.
Absolutely. 5 of the warmest years on record have happened since 2010. Our planet is getting hotter. And we need to put that heat back on the politicians.
Absolutely.
We need them to start acting, guys. We need to declare a climate emergency.
So we also have so much footage available to us now, and if it comes through, we will show you. You'll be the first to see it, of these climbers, what they've experienced, and also the prep that they've done to do this, and the people that they've met. There have been some amazing stories about that people have shared with us. We've got Amelia, who's a Townsville flood victim. She was going home and then realised that, of course, she thought she wouldn't experience this type of flood. She had a raised home, so thought she'd done everything she can to prevent the type of damage.
In the middle of an unbearably hot summer. This is completely and utterly unexpected.
And yet, she experienced those horrific floods. She had to evacuate her home, take all of her belongings out. People are experiencing this today. And Laura, one of our phenomenal climbers, actually has a message that she's recorded from up there, which is truly inspirational. We're so lucky to hear from them. So we'll cut to that now, as soon as that is available. One moment.
Hello, we are here on the we are under the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We are on Gadigal land today, and I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and recognise that we're on stolen land. I want to start off by saying how amazed I am and how inspired I am by the team that I work with, that I'm working with right now, and that we've made it to where we are. We're safely attached under the bridge, and we know exactly what we're doing. We're here to put our bodies on the line, to send a message to Scott Morrison, and any successes in the coming weeks, that we want climate action now. We want you to declare a climate emergency. There's water lapping at the doors of Pacific Island homes. There's people experiencing it all across Australia. We need real leadership, and right now the youth of Australia, the students that are striking, are speaking more truth and are doing more for our country than our leaders, which is ridiculous, which is why we're here. We've lost some of our climbers, which is sad, but we can hear them yelling out, "We love you," from the side of the bridge, which is nice. I think that's all I got for now. We'll check.
Guys, thanks for joining us. And in breaking news that's making headlines around the nation, 3 Aussie activists climbed the Sydney Harbour Bridge this morning, the largest steel arch bridge in the world, to show to show their support for a climate emergency and to call on our government to act for change.
We know we need to divest in coal. We need to get out of it now. We need to replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. We know the technology exists and we know we can do this. And we're calling on our government to do that. This story has gone everywhere. It's been across all of the major newsletters, from Sky, the Daily Telly, ABC, Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian, everywhere. So this is so wonderful. What a way to demonstrate power, demonstrate that this issue is important to so many people. They're talking about it and you can too. So please do with the hashtag climate emergency or sign the petition below. We've actually got one of the amazing climbers up there. His name's PECK. And PECK has a message from all of us. He's sent this update from the bridge itself. This is from earlier today, but this is the exclusive footage that we can offer you. So we'll cut to that now. Thanks so much for watching. Again, hashtag climate emergency.
Good morning. PECK Perth here. Just checking in. Here we are high above the Sydney Harbour, taking action for the climate emergency. We have 3 climbers here, safely attached to the Harbour Bridge. Here we'll be deploying a message to our leaders to declare a climate emergency and take action on the climate crisis we're experiencing.
Guys, that footage came straight from the Sydney Harbour Bridge, where this morning 3 activists climbed and abseiled down the side with one major demand for all political parties, but specifically, at the moment, Scott Morrison as our Prime Minister.
And that is to declare a climate emergency, something that countries across the planet are lining up to do. We've got Ireland, UK, and even Zurich last night lining up to say we're going to take this issue for what it is, an emergency. And the way to do that is to replace coal-fired power stations with clean energy. We know that's the best way to combat this crisis, and that's what these brave activists are calling for today.
Declaring a climate emergency essentially means putting the climate and the environment at the centre of every decision our government makes. The effects of climate change have been unprecedented. They are sweeping across Australia. This morning you have seen footage, images, live stream from victims of climate change, people who have experienced it in their environment, in their homes, in their agriculture, in the way they make a living.
Absolutely, and we need to thank everyone who showed a message of support, signed the petition, or tweeted about this, or shared it in any way with the hashtag climate emergency. It means the most, and I can tell you it means a lot to those climbers. What we can show you now is an update again from Laura and PECK. This is just before they descended earlier this morning, so please enjoy this footage and we'll have some breaking updates for you very soon.
G'day, PECK Perth here, checking in. We're still on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, taking action for the climate emergency that we're experiencing across the country and the world. Rescue police are closing in quickly, but we will try and stay for as long as possible and to deliver this message to Scott Morrison and anybody who takes over his position and future leaders. So we're standing with thousands of Australians around the country. We are calling for an immediate action on climate change and a declaration of a climate emergency from our government. and we need to start making changes and making changes now and to take action. We'll check in as soon as we can. As you can see, we are possibly getting some company, but we will try and stay strong and keep the message loud and clear. Delivering the message that there is a climate emergency and we need immediate action from our government. It's a beautiful morning. We've just got some company upstairs. But we are going to stay for as long as possible and to make sure the message is heard loud and clear by those in power and those who will take power after the election. So yeah, we'll stand strong and we'll be hanging around. Okay, here we are, Sydney Harbour Bridge. Rescue police are attempting to remove us from our stand to voice the people of Australia's concerns about our climate crisis. Hello. We're staying as long as possible, but the police are messing with our ropes. It's a little bit disconcerting, considering they use less ropes than us, but we'll put our lives in their hands, I guess. And we have our friends down there standing strong. Sure.
No, no. It's a bit scary.
Yeah. As long as Scott Morrison can read our message down here and over there where our friends are, that we are in a climate emergency and we need to declare it immediately. Daniel, do you have anything to say before I go? Need to declare a climate emergency now.
Hello. We're still here, very slowly getting pulled up by police rescue. I feel like our message is pretty hard to ignore. We've chosen a pretty good vessel to send the message out. I feel like each and every...
Guys, welcome back. I'm Katrina Bullock, the Legal and Governance Officer here, coming to you live from Greenpeace HQ. And joining me is a dear friend and colleague.
I'm Jack Balhausen. I'm a digital campaigner here at Greenpeace. For those who happen to be tuning in just now, we've witnessed a remarkable morning. We have seen 3 activists scale the Sydney Harbour Bridge and suspend themselves abseil down, demanding that Scott Morrison declare a climate emergency.
A climate emergency that would see coal-fired power stations shut down and replaced with clean energy.
That's what we need to happen to fight this important, very important crisis. And what we have seen as well today is amazing amounts of people showing their support for this incredible action and for the bravery of not only the climbers, but the people who have been affected affected by climate damage in this country. It's amazing to see. We know that we're experiencing bushfires, floods, heat waves, and awful ramifications of extreme weather events, and a climate that is being that is destroyed, and it's going into a place where we won't be able to assure a future for everyone. It's been amazing to see. We want to thank everyone who's come in for this broadcast. It's been remarkable.
This morning we have had so many people reach out, share their stories of how climate change has affected them, whether it be through flood, fire, agriculture, the land. Be willing to share that story and put momentum behind this. So many people have been kind enough to share this, to spread this message. It's reached national and world news at this point.
Sky News, Daily Telly, ABC, Sydney Morning Herald, The Guardian, everyone has been reporting this, and that's been made possible by you. It's been made possible by people who are getting this message out there. This hashtag of climate emergency has been trending. The Sydney Harbour Bridge has been trending, and Greenpeace has. We know that 30,000 of you signed this petition.
Thank you.
30,000 people. That is remarkable. And these people who have put themselves on the line, on the front line, will be so grateful that you did what you could in this instance.
This is the kind of momentum that a government, whoever is in power in 2 weeks' time, cannot ignore. This has made national headlines. This has made world headlines this morning.
And what we can tell you now is that after 4 hours of participating in this, in the bravery of these climbers, that all of the climbers have safely have lowered themselves down from the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
We can confirm that they're doing well?
They're doing well, absolutely. They're in good spirits, and we'll be able to update on their condition at some point in the day. But they have completed their part of that. And I think we can just say, on behalf of everyone who supported this action, what an amazing effort it's been from them. We stand in solidarity, and we are so proud of what they've done today.
Absolutely. There is national support for this demand. It is time for Scott Morrison to declare a climate emergency now.
This has trended across Twitter and Facebook. It has gone absolutely bonkers. People are talking about this, and we need to use this momentum forward. This moment and this action may be complete now, but this conversation is not. You have something very important on Saturday to do, and that is to vote in the interests of climate action, voting for parties and policies that do support meaningful action on climate change. We all need to do our part, and we need to treat this for the emergency that it is and take drastic action like these brave activists have done today.
Thousands of messages have flooded in from Facebook, from Twitter. We've had so many people approach us in the office this morning, excited that this momentum is building and that we're going to see change. And change, guys, change is coming.
It is, and we really feel it. With an action like this, seeing how much support it has gotten, knowing that the majority of Australians support this issue, we know we can do this. We just have to all band together and do every single thing that we can.
We are all standing together. Hashtag climate emergency is trending across both Twitter and Facebook. And as Jack said, the moment is over, but the conversation has only just begun.
So please make the brave efforts of these people who have put themselves on the line, the people who experience climate damage in Australia every day through bushfires, floods and drought. Make everything that they go through and that they put on the line worth it. We need you to have conversations with people in your lives. We need you to talk about this in a meaningful, constructive way, and we need to hold our politicians to account. They need to do what they can to stop this climate catastrophe and do what we can to prevent it. And I think today is a remarkable start and a push forward for that.
Absolutely. A really heartfelt message from everyone here at Greenpeace, the activists on the bridge, all of the people who have supported this action. Thank you for getting behind it. Thank you for making it what it is.
This is not over, it's just starting. So please keep this conversation going. Use the hashtag climate emergency, and thank you so much for watching this morning. It has been such a pleasure to bring this amazing event to you. All the best.